Chapter 8. Old Armand found that he enjoyed the companionship of the gypsy camp. He liked to sit with his back against the fence watching Susie teach the gypsy girls and Paul play games with the boys. On the other hand, Susie was not satisfied. She often frowned as she watched Paul and the boys. At last she brought her problem to the hobo. "I am worried about my brother," she confided in a grown-up way. "He doesn't act like he belonged to our family anymore. He's always playing with the gypsies, and he hardly ever comes near Evelyn and me. We're his family." Armand had noticed this to himself, but he tried to comfort Susie. "Paul's a boy," he said, "so naturally he doesn't want to hang around girls all the time. You wouldn't want to put him in skirts, would you?" But Susie only pointed wrathfully across the courtyard. "Look!" she cried. "He even stands like a gypsy," because Paul was idly standing on one leg with the other drawn up under him. He looked like a small stork. "People have different ways of resting," Armand assured her. "Now me, I lie down, that's the best way yet." Paul himself didn't help matters. "I wish I were a gypsy," he told them one day. "I like the way they live. I wish I could go away with them in the spring." Armand tried to reason with him. "If God wanted you to be a gypsy, he would have made you one," he said. But he doesn't want everybody trapezing all over the country and living in tents. You don't want to spend your grown-up life banging on tin pans, do you? Not when you have a smart sister like Susie to teach you things." Paul scowled and dug his toe into the sand. Armand smiled to see that his worn shoes were neatly capped with shining copper. Paul followed his look, then he smiled too. "The boys helped me mend my shoes," he explained. Then he ran away to join them. "You see," said Susie, "he's even learning how to work with copper." Armand tried to think of something else to say to her, but his mouth only gaped open and his tongue stiffened. A policeman was entering the yard. He was a stern-looking officer with a heavy coat and full-cut cape. His hat was pulled down over his thick eyebrows. The gypsy boys, followed by Paul, disappeared into the tents. Most of the men were gone, but the few remaining ones vanished quickly as the boys. Even the dogs, Jojo among them, tucked their tails between their legs and dived under the one automobile left in the yard. Morelli rose from the steps of the van and went to meet the policeman. "Your fortune, monsieur?" she asked in her softest voice. "Let me tell you your fortune. Perhaps there is a promotion waiting for you." The policeman ignored her offer. "Is there a Nicky here?" he asked gruffly. "No," said Morelli quickly. "He has gone." "Where?" asked the policeman. Morelli shrugged her shoulders. "He is out of town." "When will he return?" persisted the man. "Tomorrow." "Who knows?" said Morelli vaguely. "Today is today, and tomorrow may come late this year." The policeman turned on his heels and stamped away. Immediately the gypsy faces appeared in every tent opening. The dogs came slinking from under the car. The women gathered around Morelli. The men and children quickly joined them. "They want to arrest Nicky," guessed one of the men. "It must be because he cut down the Christmas tree," said Paul. "They want to put him in the army," wailed an old woman. "I know that's it. They put my Teodoro in the army, and he was never the same again. Gave up the wandering life and settled down in a house." All the gypsies were upset without another word to each other. They began packing up their belongings and tearing down their tents. Pietro grumbled when they started on his, but when he learned the reason, he awakened, as if a pitcher of ice water had been thrown in his face. "We can't leave until the rest of the men come home from the restaurant," said Morelli. She went to the opening and peered down the street. The Calcett children watched the activity with growing alarm. They had never seen the gypsies work so hard or so fast. "You're going to leave," cried Susie. We always leave if the police visit us," said Tinka. "If we didn't, someone might be put in jail." Morelli appealed to Armand. "Why don't you come with us?" she invited. "You and the Calcetts. The skies are blue in Provence now, and the flowers are blooming." "I'll go with you," cried Paul with shining eyes. "I want to be a gypsy." "No, no," cried Susie, grabbing his arm. "We can't go off with the gypsies. We have to stay with Mama. We're her children." Paul tore loose from her grasp. "I'm sick of being wet and cold," he said. "If I was a big man, I'd go to work and make enough money to buy us a house." Susie grabbed him again and angrily shook him. "You're always bragging about what you'd do if you were a big man," she retorted. "You better begin thinking what you should do while you're a little boy." I'm going with the gypsies, repeated Paul, trying to pull away. Oh, Monsieur Armand, implored Susie. Please don't let him go. Armand gently put his hand on Paul's shoulder. You can't go with them, boy, he said. You've got to stay here with your family. Why can't I go? Asked Paul, rebelliously. Why do I have to stay here? Armand crossed his arms and stared down at the red-headed boy. You can't go because you've got red hair, he said. That's why. Why does that matter? Asked Paul. It matters plenty, answered Armand. How far do you think the gypsies would get with a red-headed child? People would think they had kidnapped you. The police would put you in some strange home and the gypsies in jail. A sudden thought darkened Susie's blue eyes. We won't have any place to stay now, she said. Do you think the new house will be ready for us in time, Monsieur Armand? Armand lowered his head in shame. If we could move there soon, said Paul, I wouldn't want to go with the gypsies. I'd stay and help us move in. Well, will you take us to look at it, Susie begged the hobo. Then we can see if it's almost finished. Armand put his head between his hands. There won't be any new house for you, he confessed. It was all a mistake. It turned out the builders don't want children and dogs in it. You know how it is with a brand new place. They want to keep it looking that way. No house for us? Cried Susie with a catch in her voice. Nothing? Armand couldn't look in her eyes. Paul darted away to the gypsies. When the rest of the men returned, they were all startled to hear about the policeman's unexpected visit. Nicky was upset by more than the call. And just at this unfortunate time, when I've lost my wallet with all my week's earnings in it, he cried. I know I lost it in the cafe of the Laughing Frog, and the owner said he would have it returned to me if it were found. Humph, grunted Armand. Who would return a wallet full of money? Some people collect the stuff. Pietro tried to help. We can use what I have in my pocket, he offered. Then we will have to work along the way. I'm really wide awake now. The little house on wheels was hooked to the back of one of the automobiles. The gypsies and their dogs piled over the seats. Jojo whined to go too because he enjoyed his ride so much on Christmas Eve. We left one of the tents for you all, cried Nicky. There's almost another week due us on the yard, Morelli added. We've been paying rent to the wreckers. The automobiles coughed and sputtered, then they slowly ground through the sand toward the opening. The gypsies waved goodbye. Tinka threw Susie a kiss. Jojo tried to follow the cars, but Armand called him back. The little house on wheels, which had been a home for Susie and her mother and sister, disappeared into the street. There was nothing left to show that the gypsies had ever lived in this yard. Nothing but a weather-beaten tent and the dead ashes of their fires. Then those left behind noticed something else missing from the yard. There was no Paul. He was gone. He left with them, wailed Susie. Paul went off with the gypsies. Evelyn began to howl. I want Paul, she wept. I want my brother. Oh, la, la, groaned Armand, and there's still Madame to face. He silently set to work getting a cold lunch for the children. The gypsies had left some cheese and bread in the tent, but no one seemed hungry, not even Jojo. Armand felt that he was to blame for it all. He sat down on his back against the fence and thought. Oh, it was all his fault. He had brought the children to the gypsies in the first place, but he had only tried to help them. That's what he got for ever having anything to do with starlings. Now he was caught in the same net with them. But was he? No. He could get up and go. He could push his buggy right through that opening in the fence and never come back. At that moment he rose to his feet, looked toward the opening. To his amazement, he saw a forlorn little figure coming through it. "Paul!" he shouted. "Is it really you, Paul?" The boy nodded sadly as if he wished it were somebody else. "You left the gypsies and came back to us? We're your family," cried Susie joyously. "I didn't go away with the gypsies," said the boy. "You're always saying I should stop bragging about what I'll do when I'm big and do something now. So I went down to the halls and tried to get a job." "Tried to get a job at the halls?" asked Armand with fresh surprise. "That funny tramp you knew said they needed pushers," Paul reminded him. "You're too little to work," said Susie. "You have to be big, like Monsieur Armand." The hobo uneasily tugged at his whiskers. Paul looked at the copper toes of his shoes. "That's what all the men said," he continued. "They laughed at me. They showed me a big cart full of boxes and told me that if I could push it, I could have a job." Paul wiped his eyes with his knuckles. "I pushed and pushed, but I couldn't even budge it. Then they all laughed at me again." Armand was indignant. "The nerve of them," he exclaimed. "I'll go down there tomorrow morning and hang them all up on those hooks. But he didn't finish his threats. He was frightened to see the policeman coming in again. Oh, this must have something to do with Paul's visit to the halls. Perhaps they had got wind of these vagabond children, and the policeman was coming to take them away. Oh, they should have gone with the gypsies." But the policeman looked bewildered. "Weren't the gypsies in this yard?" he asked. "They had to leave suddenly," said Armand. "Received word of a sick relative in Normandy." "And I suppose the one named Nicky left with them," added the policeman. "Of course," said Armand. "It was his relative who was sick." The policeman pursed his lips and shook his head. "Too bad," he said. "A wallet lost by him was found under a table at the Cafe of the Laughing Frog. Too bad." He pulled a new leather wallet from a pocket under his cape, and in it is the lucky ticket that won yesterday's lottery. Too bad. It is a shame. Armand's eyes brightened. "I'll keep the wallet for him," he offered. The policeman eyed suspiciously. His sharp eyes saw Armand's unkempt whiskers and ragged tramp clothes. He tucked the wallet under his cap again. "I can't deliver it to anyone but the rightful owner," he said. Then he turned and walked away, shaking his head and muttering, "Too bad, too bad." Armand exploded with a roar. "Too bad indeed," he roared. "I call it a tragedy to lose that nice new wallet." "And all the money," said Susie. "And the lucky ticket," added Paul. Said Armand. "What would Nicky do with so much money? It might ruin his character, but anyone would hate to lose that wallet. It's just the right size for carrying around the coins a man needs." "What will we do now?" worried Susie. "We won't have any place to live after this week." "Mamma will cry," said Evelyn solemnly. "I wish I could have moved that cart," said Paul. "I tried so hard." A great feeling of shame came over Armand at the boy's words. The children's eyes returned to him with that needful look. He cleared his throat. "Everything is going to turn out all right," he assured them. "I'm going to get a steady job. Your mamma and I ought to make enough between us to rent the room in Clichy for you nestlings." Then, frightened by his own brave words, he slumped to the ground and leaned back weakly against the wall. Chapter 9. Madame Calcette was the most surprised of all when she heard that Armand planned to take a regular. "I can't let you do that," she said. "It would not be fair." For a few seconds, Armand was ready to agree with her. Oh, la la la, to settle down to work after all these lazy years. But there were the children with their pleading eyes. "It would be the fairest thing in Paris," persisted Armand, half arguing with himself. "We put our money together to pay rent, and with what is left over we eat. You cook my meals and give me a corner to live in. Susie can draw a square on the floor." "But you shouldn't have to help us," said Madame Calcette. "We aren't even related to you." The children disagreed. "He's our grandpa," cried Susie. "He's the only grandpa we have," said Paul. "Grandpapa, grandpapa," sang Evelyn. "Do I have to beg for grandchildren?" Armand asked Madame Calcette. "To tell you the truth, I'm beginning to be ashamed of begging. It takes away a man's self-respect." Madame Calcette had to give in. There were too many against her. Once she had agreed, she became very practical. "If you are going to look for work," she said, "you must look respectable. One who seeks a job tries to look his best." "How do I do that?" asked Armand. "First, you take a bath," she told him. "A bath!" exclaimed Armand in alarm. "At this time of the year?" "It'll be warm enough in the tent because it is near the bakery wall," she said. "I will heat water in a pot over the fire. Then you can take a bird bath in there." "I'll die of pneumonia," he declared. "You will be a new man," she promised. Even while he made excuse after excuse, she built up the fire and brought water from the street hydrant. "There now," she said when the water was boiling. "It is time for you to use that pink soap. I did not give it to you to eat." So Armand carried the water into the tent, fussing and fuming all the while. "Come, Jojo," he called the dog. "You can chase the soap when it slips out of my hands." "And throw your clothes out," called Madame Calcette after him. "Susie and I will sponge the spots, and I will mend the holes and tears." She went to work on Armand's old clothes. She hung them on the fence and beat them. She and Susie sponged the stains and spots as best they could. Evelyn made herself busy brushing his worn beret. "And he can wear that other pair of shoes in his buggy," said Paul. "The gypsies and I mended the soles with copper to surprise him." They could hear moans and groans coming from the tent. Then they heard Jojo howling. "Oh, I hope they didn't spill hot water over themselves," said Susie. "Perhaps Jojo ate the pretty soap," said Evelyn. To their astonishment, a strange beast came bounding from the tent to them. It was a dripping, wet beast, but a very white one. It was Jojo, looking as if he had fallen into a bucket of whitewash. Susie grabbed him before he could roll in the sand. "He's white, Mama," she cried in amazement. "He's really a white dog." She took a clean rag and pulled him over to the fire. She rubbed and rubbed him dry, his long fur fluffed out like duckling fuzz. Evelyn kept asking, "Where is Jojo? Where is our Jojo?" Paul brought Armand's clothes and shoes to him. When the man came out of the tent, he looked as changed as Jojo. Like the dog's fur, his whiskers were soft and fluffy, and he had a damp look. Susie was enchanted with his bearded chin. "I'll trim it for you," she offered. Obediently, Armand sat on a slab of concrete, and Susie went to work with her mother's scissors. She snipped and snipped. "I made a mistake in the middle," she said, "so I'll have to make 2 points." She frowned and snipped some more. From one side to the other she moved, snipping with the scissors. At last she was satisfied. "You look so distinguished," said Madame Calcette in admiration. "Just like an artist," added Susie admiringly. "Why do you have to dress up to get a job as a pusher at the halls?" asked Paul. "They don't look like that." "Ta-ta!" exclaimed Armand. "You don't think I'm going to apply for a low job like that, do you?" "Are you going to be a policeman?" asked Evelyn. "No, indeed," replied Armand. "Don't you remember my friend Father Christmas said somebody was looking for a night watchman? That's the job for me. Rest all day and take a couple walks around some building during the night. And once I get Jojo trained, I won't even have to do that." "But no one will be able to see you at night," said Susie in disappointment. "They won't be able to see your stylish whiskers." Armand laughed at this as he walked toward the opening. Then he called to Jojo. "Come, boy," he called. "Part of this job will belong to you, too." He walked slowly in the direction of the Louvre store. His copper soles clinked against cobbles and asphalt. He didn't want to hurry to a job. Goodness, no. He might change his mind at the last minute. "Now, what was the name of the man who was looking for the watchman?" he asked Jojo. "Camille won't be there any more. Monsieur, I've caught it. Latour, Monsieur Latour." His steps clinked faster and the fluffy white dog pranced at his heels. The Rue de Rivoli was busy as a beehive again. Hadn't those people bought all they needed? But the Christmas decorations were gone. Now the vendors were screaming about the New Year. Armand helped Jojo through the glass doors of which the store was so proud. He walked to a saleslady. "Is there a Monsieur Latour here?" he asked. "He's on the mezzanine now," she answered. "Oh, no, here he comes. Monsieur Latour, Monsieur Latour." Armand turned to face the haughty floorwalker. His first idea was to grab Jojo in his arms and run through the glass doors again. But the haughty Monsieur did not recognize them. Somehow the new Armand found his voice. "Camille, who worked here at Christmas, told me that you were looking for a night watchman, Monsieur," he said. Monsieur Latour tapped his forehead, trying to remember something. He kept looking at Armand in a puzzled way. "Oh, yes. A friend wants someone dependable to look after his building," he answered. "But haven't I met you somewhere before? Your face looks familiar." "Perhaps we were at the same concert," said Armand. "Has your friend found a man yet?" Monsieur Latour kept staring at him. Then he noticed Jojo. His face cleared. "I think I remember now," he said. "It was at a dog show somewhere." "Probably," answered Armand. "Jojo has won lots of blue ribbons at them, but the job—" "Ah, yes," said the floorwalker. "I'll write down the address for you. It isn't far from here, and ask for Monsieur Brunet." He took a small folded bag from the counter and wrote the address. With a flourish, he handed it to Armand. "Just off the Rue de l'Opera," he said. Armand pocketed the bag and hurried out of the store before the floorwalker's memory could improve. He crossed the street and went through the arcades of the Theatre Français, with its grimy walls and pillars. He looked at the square where sycamore trees were bare and the 2 fountains dry. "It will be a nice place for me to loaf on spring days," he said to Jojo. Already he could see green trees and hear the splashing of the fountains. A woman wearing a fur coat and a feather hat came parading down to the Rue de l'Opera with a black poodle. The poodle wore a green plaid coat and fur-topped booties. It stopped and to sniff at Jojo as if to say, "Haven't we met at some dog show?" But the woman jerked at its leash. Armand strolled down the Rue de l'Opera with such dignity that his shoes scarcely made a sound. On both sides were fashionable shops with windows made up to attract wealthy shoppers. At the very end stood the magnificent opera house with its green dome and the graceful statues on its roof. Armand pulled out the bag and looked at it. Then he turned down the next side street. It was a narrow, hidden street, and the stores on each side were much humbler than those on the Rue de l'Opera. Armand studied the number on the bag. He matched it with the one on a wooden arch over a broken gate. He turned into a shabby brick-paved courtyard. It was closed in by the blank walls of 3 tall buildings. Through the years they had been patched with bricks of different colors. One wall was so old and crooked that it was held up by great wooden props. Directly across from the grate, the lower wall was divided into stores even dingier than those in the narrow street. And not far from the entrance, a glass and cubbyhole was built into the wall. 2 men came out of it now. One went into the store advertising second-hand radio parts. The other, a lean man wearing spectacles, approached Armand. "Can you tell me where I can find Monsieur Brunot?" asked Armand, sweeping his beret from his head. "You are looking at him," answered the man with good humor. Then Armand showed him the writing on the bag and explained his mission. "I should like the job of night watchman, monsieur," he said, "if it isn't riled yet. I have eyes like a cat in the dark." The man corrected him. "It is not a night watchman we want," he said, "but a caretaker. You know, someone dependable to give the tenants their keys, distribute the mail, and put out the trash cans early each morning." Armand blinked. This was a different kettle from the one he had been sold. The job sounded as if there was some work attached to it. Monsieur Brunot noticed his hesitation. "We really want a family man," he said. That brought Armand's mind back to the needy Calsets. "Oh, I've got a family, all right, monsieur," he said. 3 children and their mother. You should see my grandchildren. They would steal your heart away." The man looked pleased. He even scratched Jojo's ears. "And a dog," he added to Armand's family. "What's your name?" "Armand Pauli," said the other without any hesitation. "And I've never been one to fear work." "The work isn't so hard," said Monsieur Brunot, "but it ties one down. That's why the last man left." "Oh, I'm already right well tied down by my family," Armand assured him. "And the pay is low," said Monsieur Brunot, "but that's because of the living quarters that go with the job." "Living quarters?" asked Armand, pricking up. "Right through the door here," said the man. He led Armand into the cubbyhole and down some steps. He opened another door. 3 rooms, he went on. "Small, of course, and the light is poor, but they're dry and there's running water in the kitchen." He snapped on a dim light, and Armand looked at each room in turn, as if he were very particular about where his family lived. The paint was peeling off the walls, and the few pieces of furniture were worn down to the bone. The kitchen stove was rusted, and the linoleum on the floors were cracked and faded. But even as he looked, Armand saw the rooms change in front of his eyes. As if by magic, the walls brightened with a new coat of paint. Lace curtains appeared at the small, high windows. He walked over the floors carefully, as if not to disturb the woven rugs which would replace the linoleum. The splintered tabletop disappeared under a check cloth. Susie was sitting by it, studying her books. The stove began to crackle as Madame Calsette stood over it stirring the soup. And there was Evelyn climbing the high stool to look out the window. Paul was playing with Jojo in the courtyard. "It isn't walls and furniture that make a home," Armand told Monsieur Brunot. "It's the family." Then he added, "Monsieur Latour said to tell you that he recommended me highly." "I can see by your appearance that you are sober and industrious, Pauli," said Monsieur Brunot, "and that is enough for me. Do you think you could get moved in by tomorrow? That doesn't give you much time, but I'd like to be free for New Year's Day." New Year's Day! Tomorrow night would be New Year's Eve. It would find the Calsets and himself beginning a new life as well. "We can move in this afternoon, monsieur," said Armand. "The children's mother has the day off today, and we don't have much fancy bric-a-brac to move." Monsieur Brunot explained some of his duties. There were the keys hanging in the cubbyhole. They belonged to the rooms over the stores. Be sure the tenants didn't walk off with them. He must close and lock the gate at night and open it early in the morning. Perhaps Madame would help him with the keys and roomers. A woman was so necessary in a job like this. That is why he hadn't taken the last 2 men who applied. Oh, that would suit Madame Calsette to a hair. Now she could give up her job in the laundry and stay home to look after her children and the roomers. She would be earning her own way. That would make her happy. The 2 men shook hands as he turned to go. Armand noticed the twisted trunk of an old wisteria vine in the corner. Come spring, a vine that big would be covering the ugly blind walls with blossoms. The courtyard would be a garden. At last he was on his long way to where the Calsets were waiting. Jojo barked happily at his heels as if his eyes too had seen the way the rooms in the courtyard would look in the future. Armand walked briskly. He raised his head so that the points of his beard were thrust forward. He straightened his shoulders in the mended coat. He wasn't a hobo anymore. He was a working man of Paris. The end.